Picture yourself stepping through a doorway into the heart of ancient Rome, not a grand temple or senator's home, but something even more rare, a bustling workshop, pulsing with energy, where the air is thick with the smell of damp clay, crushed marble, and hot metal. Around you, the rhythmic tap of mallets on chisels echoes like a heartbeat, while dust motes dance in the light slanting through high windows. This is not a place of quiet study or distant observation. This is a living, breathing forge of creation where young hands, clumsy at first, would learn to coax gods and heroes from stubborn stone. You are about to enter the world of an apprentice sculptor, where talent was forged in fire and patience, and where the legacy of Rome was built one careful strike at a time. It's easy to imagine ancient Rome through its grand monuments, the Colosseum, the Pantheon, the awe-inspiring statues that still command our attention 2,000 years later. But behind every masterpiece was a beginner, a young person, maybe not much older than you, standing exactly where we just stepped, overwhelmed, inspired, and utterly determined. This journey isn't just about stone and chisel, it's about what it meant to learn, to struggle, and to create in one of history's most vibrant civilizations. How did a novice become a master? What did it feel like to hold a tool for the first time, knowing that one mistake could have weeks of work? And what can their story teach us about dedication, art, and the universal hunger to leave something beautiful behind? Welcome. In this video, we're not just exploring history, we're stepping into the worn sandals of an apprentice sculptor. We'll walk through the noisy, chaotic, and magnificent world of a Roman workshop, from the first nervous day to the moment a block of marble begins to breathe as a work of art. You'll discover the tools, the teachers, the grueling lessons, and even the hidden dramas unfolding behind these ancient walls. This is a story of grit and grace, of dust and dreams. And by the end, you won't just understand how these artists worked, you'll feel as if you were right there with them, sharing in the sweat, the sparks, and the stunning moment when raw potential transforms into enduring legacy. So let's take a look around this workshop, our new home. Forget clean white gallery spaces. This is a place of raw, gritty industry. It's likely a large open-air courtyard if the weather is good, or a high-ceilinged hall with a vast tiled roof if the work must move indoors. The first thing that would strike you is the overwhelming noise, a constant, percussive symphony of purpose. From one corner, the sharp, precise tap, tap, tap of metal on stone. From another, the low, grating scrape, scrape of a rasp smoothing a curve, and beneath it all, the rhythmic hiss of the bellows stoking the forge's fire for metalworking. The air itself is a thick haze of fine white dust that coats every surface, including your skin and hair, and it carries the distinct, earthy smell of wet clay, crushed limestone, and the sharp, metallic tang of hot bronze. Along the walls, tools are meticulously organized, not tossed aside. Heavy mallets and wooden mallets hang beside rows of chisels, each with a different shaped head. The pointed puntello for roughing out a form, the flat gradina for refining planes, and the fine scalpello for the most delicate detail work. You'd see bows for driving drills, calipers for measuring proportions, and coarse rasps for shaping, and everywhere the raw materials stand as silent potential giants. Great blocks of Carrara marble, creamy white with subtle gray veins, are propped on sturdy wooden stands, waiting for their form to be discovered within. Near the forge, stacks of wax models for the lost wax casting process share space with clay bins and dark, gleaming ingots of bronze, the literal building blocks of emperors and deities. But the true structure of this space isn't just physical, it's a strict social hierarchy, a clear ladder you are firmly at the bottom of. At the top is the magister, the master. He is the owner, the creative force, the one who secures the prestigious commissions from wealthy patrons or the state itself. He doesn't do the brute labor anymore. He moves between workstations, offering a critical eye, correcting a line with a piece of charcoal directly on the stone, and making the key decisions that define the final work. Beneath him are the apophis, the journey-level sculptors and skilled artisans. These are the experts who execute the master's vision, handling the complex sections like faces, hands, and drapery. There are the undisputed professionals in the room, and then at the foundation of it all are the apprentices, the discipuli. Your world is one of observation, preparation, and sheer physical effort. You are the one fetching tools, mixing plaster, keeping the water buckets full for cooling and lubricating stone, and endlessly sweeping up the ever-growing piles of dust and chips. You learn by watching, by listening, and by doing the most repetitive, unglamorous tasks, all under the watchful and often impatient eyes of those above you. This workshop is a classroom, a factory, and a proving ground, all echoing under one dusty roof. So how did you even get a foot in this door? How did a young person find themselves in this dusty, demanding world? The path to becoming an apprentice was rarely a matter of simple choice or a passing interest in the arts. It was a formal, often rigid process, a gateway that determined the entire trajectory of a young life. For some, it was a birthright. If your father was a sculptor or a stone carver, you were almost certainly destined for the workshop. This was the world of familia, where trades were passed down through generations like cherished heirlooms. You grew up breathing stone dust, learning the names of tools before you could properly read, and understanding that your future was already carved, quite literally, in stone. But what if you had no family connection to the craft? For many, the route was one of economic necessity, a formal agreement that blurred the lines between education and servitude. A father who could not support his son might seek out a master sculptor and arrange an apprenticeship through a contract known as a chisel. This was not a handshake deal, it was a legally binding document, witnessed and often recorded. The master would agree to house, feed, and clothe the boy. Your new home would be his domus, and in return, he acquired your labor for a set period, typically 5 years, sometimes even longer. You were not paid a wage, your payment was the knowledge being poured into you, a value considered equal to your physical work. The contract laid out strict expectations. You vowed obedience, dedication, and moral conduct. The master, in turn, promised to teach you the art and mystery of his trade, and not to exploit your labor for menial tasks unrelated to the craft, though the line between necessary chore and exploitation was often thin and subjective. And then there was the rarest path, the one that speaks to us across the centuries, raw, undeniable talent. Imagine a young slave, perhaps from Greece or another conquered territory renowned for its artistic tradition, noticed while moving stone or sketching in the dirt. A keen-eyed master might see a spark of potential worth cultivating. Investing in such a slave elevated his value immensely. A highly skilled artisan slave could eventually earn enough to buy his freedom and set up his own workshop. Or picture a freeborn boy from a poor family who somehow got a piece of clay into his hands and shaped something that made people stop and look. If he could find a way to demonstrate that innate skill to the right person, it could be his ticket out of poverty and into a respected, tangible profession. No matter the path in, the moment that contract was sealed, your life was no longer your own. You were bound to your master, your days dictated by the rhythm of the workshop, your success or failure resting on your ability to listen, learn, and endure. That first morning arrives with a mix of exhilarating hope and sheer, gut-wrenching terror. You stand just outside the workshop's entrance, the sounds from within already a foreboding chorus of an industry you don't yet understand. Taking a final, steadying breath that does little to calm your nerves, you step across the threshold. Immediately, the reality of your new life descends upon you. The noise is 10 times louder inside, a physical force of pounding and scraping, and the dust clings to the back of your throat. All movement seems to stop for a fraction of a second as every pair of eyes, seasoned, skeptical, and utterly uninterested, flicks in your direction, assessing the new arrival before dismissively returning to their work. You are an interruption, a potential nuisance, and you feel it in your bones. The master, your magister, does not come to greet you with a warm welcome. He is a man of imposing presence, not necessarily from his size, but from an aura of absolute authority and intense focus. He remains at his workbench, examining a nearly finished bust, running his fingers over the stone lips as if waiting for them to speak. After a silence that feels like an eternity, he turns his head, his gaze not angry but coldly analytical, dissecting you as if you were a block of flawed marble. He doesn't ask your name, he already knows it from the contract your father signed. He simply gestures you over with a dust-covered hand. His voice, when it comes, is low and measured, cutting through the workshop din without needing to rise. The water buckets are by the well, keep them full. The men cannot work with dry tools. Do not stand idle, observe and learn what you can while you work. And just like that, your artistic dreams are immediately handed a bucket. Your first task is not to touch a chisel, but to perform the most vital, most monotonous labor. You are shown the large, porous clay jars that need constant replenishing. The well is outside, and the journey back and forth becomes the rhythm of your day. The senior sculptors, the Apprentices, barely acknowledge you except to point a thirsty chisel toward a jar you've let run low, a silent reprimand that stings more than shouting. You are part furniture, part beast of burden, and you quickly learn that your value is measured in your ability to stay out of the way while simultaneously anticipating every need. The other apprentices, those a year or two ahead of you, offer a different kind of challenge. They are your new siblings in this dusty prison, your only potential allies, and yet they are also your fiercest competitors. They watch you with a wary, knowing look. They've endured this initiation themselves, and their acceptance is not given. It is earned through months of uncomplaining toil. One might grudgingly show you where the best sweeping brushes are kept, while another might accidentally bump your shoulder, sending a slosh of precious water over the floor. A misstep, you know, will be blamed solely on you. This is your first lesson in the workshop's social hierarchy. You are at the very bottom, and every action is a test. Will you complain about the aching blisters on your hands from the bucket's handle? Will you sigh in frustration when ordered to sweep the same patch of floor for the third time? The master and the senior artist are watching for that flicker of arrogance, that lack of humility. They need to know if you understand that before you can learn to create beauty, you must first learn to serve it. Your first day isn't about art at all. It's a trial by dust and water, designed to strip away your ego and see what's left underneath, whether you have the resilience to begin again tomorrow. After weeks of hauling water and sweeping chips, the day finally arrives when the master gestures you toward the wall of tools. This isn't a casual introduction, it's a solemn initiation. You're not just learning about hunks of metal and wood, you are being introduced to an extension of the sculptor's own hands, each instrument a key with a single, sacred purpose. The first lesson is that no single tool does everything. Mastery means understanding this entire family of instruments, knowing each one's unique voice and temperament. The journey of a block of marble into a statue begins with the heaviest, most brutal tools. The point chisel or puntello is your introduction to this forceful conversation with stone. It's not a delicate instrument. Its business end comes to a sharp, sturdy point, and it's meant to be struck hard with a heavy iron mallet. Your first attempts are clumsy and terrifying. Each strike sends jarring vibrations up your arm, and the stone shatters away in unpredictable, coarse chunks. The master shows you how to read the stone's grain, how to find the angle that allows the point to bite and peel away large sections of waste material, a process called roughing out. This is where the block's hidden form is first roughly discovered, and it requires not just strength, but a kind of aggressive intuition. Once the general shape is revealed, the work transitions. The claw chisel or gratina takes over. Its head is flat and serrated with multiple teeth, like the claw of some metallic beast. This is the tool of refinement. The mallet strikes are lighter, more controlled, and the result isn't a spray of shattered rock, but a shower of fine, controlled lines. You learn to use the claw to define planes and angles, to carve away the marks left by the point chisel, and begin shaping the subtle slopes of a shoulder or the curve of a thigh. The sound changes too, from a loud, percussive crack to a softer, rhythmic scratch, 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 the sound of the sculpture coming into focus. But stone is not clay. You cannot add material back. Every strike is permanent. This is where measuring tools become your most trusted allies. You are taught the use of calipers and dividers, not just to measure, but to translate. A small, precise clay or wax model, the bozetto created by the master, sits on a stand nearby. Your job is to use the calipers to take a measurement from the model, then carefully transfer that exact proportion to the emerging stone figure. A mistake of a single finger's width in the model could mean a disaster on the marble. This tedious, painstaking process of measure, mark, and carve is repeated thousands of times, teaching your eye to see dimension and relationship, training your hand to execute with mathematical precision. The final stages demand an even gentler touch, moving from shaping to truly sculpting. The rasp and riffler are files made of extremely hard, coarse iron. They have no mallet. They are worked by hand in long, sweeping strokes to smooth away all the tiny ridges and tool marks left by the chisels. This is where the stone finally begins to feel soft, where hard angles become flowing curves under the relentless, abrasive kiss of the rasp. For the deepest, most inaccessible folds of drapery or the intricate curls of hair, you use a drill. This isn't a power tool, but a bow-driven drill. You learn to set the sharp metal tip, then move the bow back and forth with one hand while gently guiding the drill's progress with the other, creating deep, precise holes and channels that add shadow, depth, and breathtaking detail. The maintenance of these tools is as important as their use. At the end of each day, your new ritual begins. You sit with an oil stone and a bucket of water, sharpening every chisel the men have used. A dull tool is a dangerous tool. It can slip, shatter the stone, or cause injury. You learn the correct angle to hold the metal against the stone, the sound a truly sharp edge makes as it slides across the surface. You oil the wooden handles and check for cracks. This act of care is your final duty, a quiet, meditative end to the noisy day. It's a way of honoring the instruments that will, in time, become the voice for the visions waiting inside you. Yet before a single chisel ever touches its surface, you must learn to see the stone not as a finished object, but as a living, breathing material with its own history, personality, and hidden flaws. Your education begins not with creation, but with selection. The master might take you to the riverside wharves where newly arrived blocks, fresh from the quarries, are stacked like the bones of mountains. Your first lesson is in reading the skin of the stone. You run your hands over the rough, crystalline surface, learning to feel for the subtle telltale signs of a future catastrophe. A hairline crack, invisible to the untrained eye, can be felt as a faint ridge under your palm. That block is rejected immediately, for it would surely split apart under the force of your mallet. You are taught to look for discolorations, dark veins or rusty patches that speak of impurities, weak points that would carve unevenly or shatter without warning. A perfect block from Carrara has a consistent, sugary texture and a luminous, creamy white color, perhaps with subtle, elegant gray veins. This is the marble of emperors, capable of holding a fine edge and taking a brilliant polish. From the Greek island of Paros comes a different treasure, a finer-grained, pure white marble, almost translucent, prized for its ability to capture the most delicate nuances of light and shadow, making it the ultimate choice for divine figures and idealized portraits. Each source has its own character, and choosing the right one for the right job is the master's first and most critical artistic decision. Once a worthy block is chosen and hauled into the workshop, the real transformation begins, but even this starts with a process that feels more like geometry than art. The bozzetto, the master's small clay model, is your guide, but translating its form onto a giant, irregular block is a mathematical puzzle. This is where you learn the first true skill of the sculptor, measuring and mapping. Using a system of precise points and plumb lines, you must establish a three-dimensional grid across the stone surface. With a charcoal stick, you carefully mark key points from the model, the top of the head, the tip of the nose, the jut of a knee, transferring these critical landmarks onto the marble. It is a painstaking, methodical process, and a single error in measurement here means the entire statue will be misshapen, its proportions forever off. This meticulous groundwork is the uncelebrated foundation upon which all beauty is built. It is the discipline that contains the passion. While some apprentices are learning the language of stone, others might be stationed by the roaring heat of the forge, entering the alchemical world of bronze. This is a different kind of magic altogether, one of fire, molten metal, and intricate deception. The primary method is cera persa, the lost wax process, and it is a weeks-long dance of precision and controlled chaos. Your first task is to help build the core. This begins with a rough, solid clay model of the final sculpture. Once shaped and dried, this model is then entirely covered in a thick layer of beeswax. You spend days, sometimes weeks, carefully carving and sculpting the wax itself into the perfect, detailed final form of the statue. Every muscle, every fold of drapery, every strand of hair is rendered in this soft, temporary medium. Then the whole wax-covered form is encased in a thick, coarse clay investment, with numerous wax rods called sprues, leading from the sculpture out to the surface of this new clay mold. The entire assembly is then baked in a kiln. This is the moment of the lost wax. The heat melts the wax perfectly detailed inner layer, which drains out through the channels, leaving a hollow, empty space between the fired clay core and the fired clay mold, a space that is the exact negative shape of your beautiful wax sculpture. Now comes the thunderous, terrifying, and glorious moment of pouring. The mold is buried in a casting pit to contain the immense pressure and heat. a crucible of bronze, a glowing orange-yellow liquid hotter than anything you've ever seen, is carefully lifted from the forge. The master himself usually performs the pour, guiding the terrifying stream of liquid metal into the channels until the hollow space is completely filled. After days of cooling, the arduous task of breaking away the fired clay mold begins, a dusty explosion of discovery that reveals the rough, gleaming metal form within. Your final jobs are to cut away the sprues, chase the surface with fine chisels to remove any imperfections from the seams, and endlessly polish the bronze with abrasives and cloth until it shines with the deep, resonant glow of a god newly born from the earth's fire. One material is conquered by relentless force and patient subtraction, the other by clever illusion and transformative heat. To master both is to understand the very soul of Roman creation. So what does a typical day actually look like for you, the newest member of this dusty fraternity? It begins before the sun has fully risen, with the chill of the morning still in the air. You are the first one in the workshop, and your duties start not with artistry, but with pure, unadulterated preparation. The senior sculptors and the master will arrive to a space that must be ready for them, a canvas of organized potential. Your first task is to sweep. The fine white powder from yesterday's work coats every surface like a ghost of past efforts, and you move it into piles with a stiff bristled broom, the soft swish the only sound in the quiet hall. This isn't a quick once-over, it is a thorough cleansing, a ritual of reset. Every chip of marble, every splinter of stone must be cleared away, for a cluttered floor is a dangerous workspace where a misplaced tool or a stray piece of rubble could send a sculptor tumbling. Next come the water buckets, perhaps your most vital and most repetitive responsibility. The clay jars stationed around each work area must be filled to the brim from the well outside. The rope is rough on your still soft hands, the bucket heavy as you haul it up, and the journey back and forth is a lesson in endurance. Water is the lifeblood of the workshop. It cools the metal chisels which would otherwise overheat and lose their temper from the constant friction against stone. It lubricates the cut, turning dry, dusty carving into a wet, controlled process that produces a slurry instead of a harmful cloud of abrasive dust. Keeping those jars full is a test of your attention. Let one run low and a senior artist will simply stop working, holding his hot chisel in the air and fixing you with a silent, disappointed stare that feels heavier than any shouted rebuke. Your value in these early weeks is measured in hydration. Then there is the preparation of materials, a chemistry lesson disguised as manual labor. You are taught to mix plaster for making molds, a precise and messy affair. You learn the exact ratio of powder to water, the specific consistency needed for a perfect impression, stirring the thick, goopy substance in a large basin until your arm aches. For the bronze workers, you wet clay, removing stones and air bubbles by slamming the dense material onto a wooden table again and again, your palms becoming tough and your forearms strengthening with each impact. This prepared clay will be used to build the cores and molds for the lost wax process, and any imperfection you leave in it could lead to a catastrophic flaw in the final bronze cast. The master might assign you to help with the bozzetti, the small-scale models. Your job isn't to sculpt them, but to prepare the clay itself, kneading it to the perfect plasticity, or to turn the heavy turntable for the master as he swiftly brings a form to life between his fingers. These tasks on the surface seem like mindless drudgery, designed to break your spirit or test your obedience, but for a master who knows his craft, they are the first and most profound lessons in becoming an artist. Sweeping the dust forces you to look closely at the debris of creation. You start to recognize the different types of chips. Long, coarse splinters come from the point chisel in the early stages. Fine, gritty powder is the result of the rasp in the final smoothing. You begin to understand the entire life cycle of a sculpture just by studying the scraps on the floor. Fetching water teaches you timing and rhythm. You learn the pace of the workshop, noticing how quickly each sculptor works, anticipating their needs before they have to ask. You become aware of the flow of the day, and preparing materials is a foundational course in the very substance of art. By wedging clay for hours, you learn its personality, how much water it wants to hold, how it responds to pressure, what it feels like when it is perfectly prepared. This intimate knowledge will be invaluable years later when it is your hands shaping that same clay into a model. Mixing plaster teaches you patience and precision. A mixture that is too thin will be weak, too thick will not capture detail. There is no room for approximation. This endless, mundane grunt work is a forced meditation. It is designed to sand down your impatience, to crush any romantic illusions about art being solely about inspiration. It teaches you that true creation is 99% preparation, perseverance, and careful observation. You are not just hauling water and sweeping dust. You are learning to see the world as a sculptor sees it, where every material has a nature to be understood and every action, no matter how small, contributes to the whole. But all your labor with water and stone would remain hollow and lifeless without the most crucial skill of all, learning to truly see. The master's first real lesson for you is a silent one. He places a simple, smooth river stone in your palm and tells you to hold it, not to carve it, not to measure it, just to hold it, turn it over in your hand and feel its entire form with your eyes closed. You feel its cool weight, the subtle undulations of its surface, the way it fits perfectly in your cup palm. When you open your eyes, he tells you to draw it, not the idea of a stone, but that specific stone with every unique contour and shadow. This exercise, repeated for days with different objects, is your doorway into a new way of perceiving the world. You are being taught to see not the labels of things, but their essence, their weight, their balance, the way light defines their shape. This intense, focused observation becomes the bedrock of everything you will ever create. This new vision is then relentlessly applied to the pinnacle of artistic pursuit, the human form. The Romans, like the Greeks before them, were obsessed with achieving realism, with creating figures that looked as if they might draw breath at any moment. To do that, you had to understand what lay beneath the skin. Your anatomy lessons begin not in a medical school, but right in the workshop. The master arranges for a model, often a paid laborer or sometimes even an athletic slave, to pose for hours at a time. Your task is not to immediately start sketching, but to simply watch. You study the way the light falls across the model's back, defining the powerful ropes of muscle flanking the spine. You note how the shoulder blades shift and move with each small adjustment of the arm, how the weight distribution changes the tension in the legs. You are learning the living map of the body, its topography in motion and at rest. Alongside the live model, you are given constant access to the workshop's most prized possessions, its collection of plaster casts. These are direct copies taken from the greatest Greek and Roman masterpieces, the equivalent of a modern art student's textbook. You spend countless hours with a stylus and a wax tablet, meticulously drawing the curve of an Apollo's jawline, the intricate fall of drapery on a Minerva, the powerful, dynamic torsion of a discus thrower. This is how you internalize the classical ideals of beauty and proportion, the sacred canons that define divine and heroic forms. You are not just copying, you are absorbing centuries of accumulated knowledge, understanding how the masters used line, form, and shadow to suggest bone, sinew, and spirit. The goal is for this idealized anatomy to become second nature, so deeply ingrained that when you look at a blank block of marble, you can already see the perfect form waiting within it, waiting for your hand to set it free. For the most advanced and fortunate apprentices, this pursuit of anatomical truth could venture into territory that was both gruesome and utterly fascinating. In major cultural centers like Alexandria or later in Rome itself, a sculptor might secure special permission to observe a human dissection. These were rare and privileged events, often performed on the bodies of executed criminals. The experience would be overwhelming, the stark reality of the body's interior, the complex layering of muscle and tendon, the stark white of bone. For an artist, it was the ultimate revelation, the final key to understanding the machine that creates movement and expression. To see the precise origin and insertion points of a major muscle, to understand how it pulls on a bone to create an action, transforms your entire approach. You no longer just draw the surface, you understand the cause of the surface. You know that the bulge of the bicep is only possible because of the tendon anchoring it here, and the flexion of the wrist is governed by these specific cords running along the arm. This knowledge, as macabre as its source might be, is what allows a sculptor to move beyond creating a merely accurate statue to crafting one that seems genuinely alive, imbued with potential energy, as if it has just finished one movement and is about to begin another. It is the difference between carving a shape and releasing a figure possessed of its own breath and will. The day arrives not with a grand announcement, but with a simple, quiet gesture from one of the senior sculptors. He doesn't speak, he just points his chin toward a corner of the workshop where a pile of discarded, broken stone pieces, lies remnants of larger projects, flawed blocks, and practice scraps. Your heart leaps into your throat. This is it. You've been deemed worthy, or perhaps just patient enough, to finally make the transition from observer to participant. You select a piece of rough limestone about the size of a loaf of bread, its surface pocked and irregular. It feels heavy and inert in your hands, a world away from the soft, yielding clay you've been preparing. The senior sculptor hands you a wooden mallet and a single stout point chisel. His instructions are brutally simple. Make it a cube. It sounds so elementary, almost insulting. A cube, a child could draw one, but holding the tools, staring at the uncooperative lump of stone, you quickly understand the monumental gap between idea and execution. Your first swing is timid, a nervous tap that barely scratches the surface. The second is overcompensation, a wild, anxious strike that lands with a sickening crack, not biting into the stone but glancing off the edge and sending a painful jolt up your arm, nearly causing you to drop the chisel. The sound draws a few sideways glances, a smirk from another apprentice. The stone, you realize, is a merciless teacher. It does not forgive uncertainty. The senior sculptor walks over, takes the tools from your shaking hands without a word, and demonstrates. His posture is everything. A low, stable stance, feet planted firmly. He holds the chisel not in a white-knuckled death grip, but with a firm, guiding pressure. His other hand swings the mallet not from the elbow or shoulder, but from the wrist, a short, controlled, piston-like motion. Tap, tap, tap. Each blow is precise, economical. A small, controlled flake of stone pops away. He hands the tools back. The stone tells you where it wants to break. Listen to it, and so you begin again. This time you try to imitate that stable posture. You focus not on the entire cube, but on the first unwanted bulge you want to remove. You place the chisel's point, take a breath, and execute a short, sharp swing. Tap, a small piece shears away cleanly. It's a tiny, almost insignificant victory, but it sends a thrill through you more powerful than any artwork you've ever seen. You've communicated with the stone and it answered. The process becomes a rhythm, a physical meditation. Place, tap, shear, place, tap, shear. Your world shrinks to the point of the chisel and the spot you are focusing on. You learn to read the grain, to see the faint lines within the stone that suggest the path of least resistance. A strike against the grain results in a frustrating, powdery crush. A strike with the grain produces that satisfying, clean pop. Your arms and shoulders ache with a new, deep burn. Sweat drips from your brow, mixing with the white dust on your face. The initial dream of creating a graceful figure is completely forgotten, replaced by the singular, all-consuming goal of achieving one flat plane, then another, and making them meet at something resembling a 90-degree angle. Hours melt away, the chaotic noise of the workshop fades into a distant hum. There is only you, the tool, and the material. This is not art yet. It is a fundamental language you are learning to speak, one percussive syllable at a time. When the light begins to fade, you look down at your work. It is not a perfect cube. It's lopsided, the angles are soft, and the faces are uneven, but it is unmistakably a shape you carved. You ran your hands over its faces, feeling the rough texture your tools left behind. That lump of rock has been transformed by your own effort, and in the process, you yourself have been shaped a little more into the person who can do this work. You haven't just learned how to carve a cube, you've learned the first word in the long, complex poem of sculpture, control. This obsession with realism and anatomical perfection didn't spring from Roman soil fully formed. It was an inheritance, a cultural aspiration learned at the feet of the very civilization they had conquered. For a Roman apprentice sculptor, the path to artistic mastery was not paved with wild, untamed creativity. It was built on a foundation of reverence, repetition, and rigorous copying of the Greek masters who came before. To learn to create, you first had to learn to replicate with absolute fidelity. In the corner of the workshop, you would find a special collection of objects, treated with a care bordering on reverence. These weren't raw materials or works in progress. They were the exemplaria, the plaster casts. These casts were direct negative mold copies taken from the most celebrated Greek statues, the powerful Dorphoros by Polykleitos, the serene Aphrodite of Knidos by Praxiteles, the dynamic figures from the Parthenon pediments. They were the closest thing the ancient world had to an art museum you could hold in your hands, and they were your most important textbooks. Your assignment was not to merely glance at them for inspiration. It was to spend months, sometimes years, copying them over and over again until your hand could move with the same assured grace as the long-dead master who first carved the original. This process began not with stone but with a wax tablet and a stylus. You would sit for hours, your eyes moving constantly from the cast to your tablet, training your hand to capture the precise line that defined a jaw, the subtle curve of a hip, the complex, weight-bearing stance known as contrapposto. The goal was to internalize the ideal, to make these perfect proportions second nature. After you could draw it flawlessly, you would move to clay. Using your own two-handled turntable, you would attempt to recreate the cast in 3 dimensions, pinching and smoothing the wet earth, striving to match every subtle turn of the form. The master would circle your work, his calipers constantly measuring, comparing the distance from your figure's brow to its chin against the same measurement on the cast. A discrepancy of a single finger's width was unacceptable. This was not seen as stifling creativity. It was the essential grammar of a visual language you had to be fluent in before you could ever hope to write your own poetry. The ultimate goal was to learn the canon, the sacred system of mathematical ratios and proportions that the Greeks had developed to define ideal beauty. Polykleitos' canon, for instance, decreed that the perfect head should be 1/8 the height of the entire body, the perfect foot should be 1/6 of the height, and so on. These were not arbitrary rules. They were a deep philosophical belief that mathematical harmony was the basis of all beauty, both in art and in the universe. By endlessly copying these masterworks, you weren't just learning how to make a pretty statue, you were being initiated into a system of thought, absorbing a cultural value system that equated balance, order, and mathematical precision with divinity and truth. Your hand was being trained to execute what Greek philosophy had conceived. This practice also served a deeply practical commercial purpose. The Roman elite had an insatiable appetite for Greek art. A wealthy patron wanting to decorate his villa's peristyle garden wouldn't ask for something new and original. He would commission a high-quality copy of a famous Greek masterpiece to signal his wealth, education, and sophisticated taste. Your ability to perfectly replicate these celebrated works was your economic livelihood. The workshop's reputation and your future within it depended on producing copies that were indistinguishable in quality and spirit from the originals. This demand created a highly sophisticated copying industry, with workshops specializing in specific master sculptors or types of statues. Your training ensured you could enter this market as a valuable asset, a sculptor who could deliver exactly what the client wanted, the aura of Greek genius, faithfully reproduced by a skilled Roman hand. Your day begins not with a gentle sunrise, but with the rough shake of the senior apprentice's hand on your shoulder, while the world is still pitch black. There is no gentle easing into consciousness. You are expected to be on your feet and moving before your mind has even fully registered the command. The chill of the pre-dawn air bites at your skin as you pull on your simple tunic, a coarse linen garment already permanently stained with a fine patina of dust and clay. Your first task is always the same: to light the workshop's braziers and the forge fire. This is a responsibility that carries a weight far beyond its simplicity. A poorly built fire means a cold forge, delaying the entire day's work for the bronze smiths and earning you the collective ire of every craftsman in the room. You learn to arrange the charcoal just so, to nurture the first spark from the flint and steel into a robust, hungry flame that will define the rhythm of the morning. Breakfast is a functional, not a social affair. You receive a hunk of coarse, dark bread and perhaps a small bowl of poles, a simple porridge made from spelt wheat, sometimes flavored with a few drops of cheap oil or a handful of lentils. You eat it quickly, standing up, often while already performing your first chore of sweeping the floor from the previous day's work. There is no dedicated dining hour. Sustenance is fuel consumed during the interstitial moments between duties. As the other sculptors and artisans begin to trickle in, the true symphony of the day commences, and your role shifts from solitary preparer to a vital, if lowly, cog in a rapidly turning machine. The morning hours are a relentless blur of motion and demand. You are the workshop's circulatory system, constantly in motion to keep its heart beating. Your primary duty remains the water, an endless cycle of hauling, pouring, and replenishing. The senior artists begin their work, and the tap-tap-tap of their mallets becomes a metronome for your own labor. As soon as one jar is half empty, you are moving toward the well, the heavy bucket ropes already groaning in protest. You learn to anticipate needs, watching the angle of the sun on the stone, knowing that as the day heats up, the chisels will require more frequent cooling. Between water runs, you are grinding pigments for paints, wedging new clay for the modelers, or carefully sifting sand to be used as an abrasive for polishing. There is no moment of idleness. To stop moving is to invite a sharp word, or worse, a disappointed silence from the master, which feels infinitely more crushing. The high sun marks a brief, welcome respite. The main meal of the day, prandium, work halts, the mallets fall silent, and the only sound is the low murmur of tired men. You and the other apprentices are tasked with distributing the food. More bread, cheese, olives, and on a good day, a small piece of fish or sausage. You eat quickly, sitting on an upturned bucket or directly on the dusty floor, your muscles aching with a pleasant fatigue. This is one of the few times you can observe the master and the senior artists not as taskmasters, but as people. You listen to them discuss a difficult section of drapery, argue over the price of a new block of marble, or tell stories of past commissions. These moments are not rest, they are another form of lesson, a chance to absorb the culture and concerns of the craft. The afternoon session demands a different kind of focus. The light is now at its best, streaming into the workshop and revealing every imperfection on the stone surface. This is when the most delicate work is done, and the atmosphere becomes one of intense, quiet concentration. The loud hammering gives way to the soft scraping of rasps and the gentle hiss of the bow drill. Your tasks become more precise to match this shift in tone. You might be assigned to hold a measuring rod steady for an hour while a senior artist checks the proportions of a colossal head, your arms trembling with the effort of absolute stillness. You might be handed a handful of straw or a soft cloth and instructed to begin the initial polishing on a finished section of a statue, a monotonous circular motion that makes your wrist cramp but teaches you the feel of a perfectly smooth surface. As the light begins to fail, the work transitions once more. The detailed carving stops. Now it's time for the great cleanup, and this duty falls almost entirely to the apprentices. You sweep the incredible volume of stone chips and dust into piles to be collected. This debris, known as marmor dust, wasn't wasted. It would be sold for use in mortar or as a cleaning abrasive. Every tool must be collected, inspected for damage, and meticulously cleaned. Chisels are dried and oiled to prevent rust. The water jars are emptied and scrubbed to keep them from fouling. The floor is swept again and then swept a third time until not a single stray chip remains. This final ritual is as much about mental preparation as physical cleanliness. It is a way of closing the day's account, of setting the stage for a fresh start tomorrow. Supper cena is a quieter affair, often taken back at the master's house. You are so tired you can barely taste the simple stew of vegetables and beans. Your body aches in places you didn't know could ache, a deep, satisfying burn in your shoulders from the mallet, a raw tenderness in your palms from the ropes and tools, a permanent crick in your neck from hours of looking up at the work. Yet as you lie on your simple pallet, listening to the sounds of the city settling into night, your mind does not rest. It replays the day's events, the clean strike of a chisel, the way the light caught the curve of a newly carved muscle, a snippet of advice from a senior sculptor. You fall asleep not to dreams of fame or glory, but to the imagined rhythm of the mallet, your exhausted body and hungry mind already preparing for the identical, grueling, and utterly perfect day that awaits you at dawn. And so you learn through sweat and strain that every action in this workshop has a consequence. Every stroke of the mallet, every misplaced measure, carries a tangible price. The materials are expensive, the patron's deadline is sacred, and the master's reputation hangs in the balance with every strike. A single moment of lost focus, a flicker of arrogance, or a misunderstood instruction can lead to a mistake that echoes through the workshop with the sickening finality of splitting stone. One of the most common and heartbreaking errors for a beginner is the nose job. You might finally be trusted to work on a face, your heart swelling with pride as you define the brow ridge and the sockets for the eyes. The master has roughed out the nose, a proud, solid block projecting from the face, and your task is to refine it, to shape the elegant bridge and the subtle flare of the nostrils. You switch from the heavy point chisel to the finer claw chisel, but you misjudge the angle or the force. Instead of the tool biting and peeling away a fine sliver, it catches a hidden grain in the marble. There's a sound altogether different from the clean tap and pop you've been taught, a high, sharp ping, and then you see it, A hairline crack appears across the bridge of the nose, or worse, the entire tip shears off and clatters to the floor, a small, tragic piece of what was once a perfect face. The silence that follows is deafening. The work around you stops. All you can do is stare at the ruin of your own making, your stomach a cold knot of dread. The marble offers no second chances. The consequences are immediate and severe. The master's reaction is rarely a shouted tirade. That would be beneath his dignity and a waste of energy on something that cannot be undone. His anger is far more potent in his quiet disappointment. He will walk over, inspect the damage with a cold, clinical eye, and let out a long, slow sigh that feels like a verdict. The financial cost is the first blow, the value of that block of marble, the weeks of labor already invested by senior artists. All of it is now calculated. If you are an indentured apprentice, that cost is deducted from your future earnings, extending your term of service by months, perhaps even a year, to work off the debt. You have not just broken stone, you have mortgaged your own future. Your punishment is a swift and humiliating demotion. The fine chisels are taken from you. You are handed the heaviest, bluntest point chisel and point toward the pile of raw, uncut blocks in the yard. Your sole task for the next week, maybe month, is roughing out the brute, mind-numbing work of using sheer force to knock the largest chunks off new blocks to prepare them for the skilled hands you are no longer trusted to assist. You are banished from the creative heart of the workshop, exiled back to the realm of pure, punishing labor. This isn't just about penance, it is a brutal lesson in humility and respect for the material. You must relearn through exhausting repetition that the stone always wins against arrogance. Some mistakes, however, are catastrophic beyond repair. A senior sculptor might have spent months on a life-size statue with only the delicate feet left to carve. An apprentice, perhaps overeager to help or prove their worth, might be tasked with moving the nearly finished work to a different part of the workshop for the final polishing. If you misjudge the weight, if the ropes slip, or if you simply trip over a stray tool you failed to sweep away, the unthinkable happens. The statue tips, falls, and shatters on the hard tile floor. The sound is not a ping, but a thunderous, apocalyptic crash that brings the entire world to a standstill. The result is not a flaw to be reworked, but a total loss. Weeks of work, a small fortune in material, and a prize commission are destroyed in an instant. The consequence for such a disaster is existential. For a slave apprentice, a mistake of this magnitude could mean being sold off to a far harsher fate, perhaps the lead mines or a grain galley, your value as an artist utterly erased. For a freeborn apprentice, it could mean immediate expulsion from the workshop, your contract torn up, your chances of ever learning this trade in this city ruined forever. Your name would become a cautionary tale told to new apprentices for years to come. The workshop, for all its creative magic, is a merciless classroom where the cost of failure is measured in shattered marble and shattered dreams. A constant, grim reminder that the path to mastery is paved with the fragments of your own hard-learned mistakes. But within this dusty, hard-working world, an unspoken social code governs every interaction, a rigid hierarchy as defined and immovable as the stone you work with. To survive here, you must instantly learn to read the room, to understand your precise place in this intricate ecosystem. At the very top, the undisputed sovereign of this realm is the magister, the master. His authority is absolute and unquestioned. He is not just your teacher, he is your patron, your judge, and in many ways, your owner for the duration of your contract. You do not speak to him unless spoken to. His critiques are delivered not with encouragement, but with a blunt, surgical precision designed to correct, not to coddle. A furrowed brow from him as he examines your practice cube can feel like a physical blow, while a single, slow nod of approval is a treasure you cling to for weeks. His word is final on everything, from artistic decisions to the punishment for a mistake, and his favor is the most valuable currency in the workshop. Beneath him are the apophis, the journey-level sculptors and skilled artisans. These men are the true backbone of production, the experts who handle the most complex and prestigious parts of a commission. They have earned their status through years of flawless execution, and they expect a level of respect from apprentices that borders on reverence. You address them formally, you anticipate their every need, a fresh jar of water before theirs is empty, a specific chisel handed to them before they even have to ask for it. Their praise is rare and usually indirect. You might overhear one mention to another that the new boy doesn't let the tools get dull, and that simple comment will fuel your pride for a month. But their displeasure is swift and cutting, a sigh of irritation at having to wait for a tool, a derisive snort at your clumsy attempt to mix plaster to the right consistency. These are the subtle rebukes that remind you of your lowly station. And then there are the other apprentices, your fellow discipuli. This relationship is the most complex and often the most volatile. These are your brothers in arms, the only ones who truly understand the bone-deep fatigue, the constant anxiety, and the small, secret victories. You share a dormitory, your meager meals, and the collective burden of the workshop's drudgery. In the best of times, this creates a powerful bond. An older apprentice might sneak you an extra piece of bread after you've been punished, or show you a clever trick for holding the chisel to avoid blisters. You develop a silent language of shared looks across the workshop, a raised eyebrow at the master's bad mood, a sympathetic grimace when one of you is singled out for error. But this camaraderie is perpetually strained by fierce, unrelenting competition. There are only so many opportunities to advance, only so many chances to move from fetching water to touching stone. The master's attention is a scarce resource, and every apprentice is vying for it. You watch with a mix of admiration and bitter envy as the apprentice who arrived a year before you is finally trusted to rough out a simple decorative acanthus leaf on a frieze. Your own progress is measured directly against his. This rivalry can curdle into outright sabotage. A rival might accidentally misplace your favorite smoothing stone or give you subtly incorrect instructions for a task, hoping you'll fail and fall from grace. You learn to guard your workspace, to double-check every instruction, and to keep your breakthroughs and techniques close to your chest. This constant push and pull between the need for alliance and the drive to surpass mirrors the broader Roman values of amicita, friendship and alliance, constantly battling ambitio, the ambitious pursuit of personal glory. Your success depends not just on your skill with a chisel, but on your skill in navigating this delicate, often treacherous social world. But your world is not entirely confined to the dusty courtyard of the workshop. The master, in his relentless efficiency, soon discovers another use for you beyond hauling water and sharpening tools. You possess a pair of young, strong legs and the fading memory of the city's layout from your journey here. And so you are handed a new responsibility that is both a terrifying burden and a thrilling privilege. You are sent out on errands. These trips beyond the workshop walls are a rupture in the routine, a sudden immersion into the roaring, chaotic, overwhelming life of the city itself. Your first solo task is often a simple one, delivering a small, finished piece. It might be a delicate wax model for a client's approval, carefully wrapped in linen and cradled in your arms like a newborn, or a polished marble bust, swaddled in cloth and packed into a basket that you must carry balanced on your shoulder. The master gives you an address, a name, and a single stern warning. Do not stop, do not linger. The value of what you carry is more than your life. Stepping from the relative quiet of the workshop into the vibrant, deafening cacophony of a Roman street is a sensory assault. The narrow alleys are a river of humanity, merchants shouting prices for their wares, the clatter of iron-rimmed cartwheels on paving stones, the smell of sizzling sausages from a street vendor mixing with the less pleasant odor of waste and crowded bodies. You clutch your precious cargo tighter, your eyes wide, weaving through the crowd with a newfound sense of purpose. You are no longer just an apprentice, you are a representative of your master's officina, and the safe delivery of this piece is a direct reflection of its reputation. These errands soon grow in responsibility. You might be entrusted with a pouch of coins and sent to the wharves to pay a merchant for a newly arrived shipment of marble from Luna, learning to count the sum twice under the watchful eye of a burly ship's captain. You are sent to the pigment sellers in the Subura to bargain for precious pots of crushed malachite for green or costly cinnabar for a brilliant, bloody red, learning the art of assessing quality and haggling for a fair price. The most nerve-wracking task of all is being sent to collect a payment from a wealthy patron. You stand in the grand, echoing atrium of a domus, your dusty tunic and worn sandals feeling terribly out of place amidst polished marble floors and beautiful frescoes. You present the master's carefully written bill to a stern-faced steward, who counts out the coins with slow, deliberate precision before handing them over. You must then count them again yourself, your heart pounding, knowing that a mistake here, accepting a single coin less than owed, would be a disaster you could never explain away. Yet these daunting tasks are also your window to the future. As you move through the city, your eyes are open. You see where and how the art you help create actually lives. You deliver a statue to a lush private garden and see how the light falls on it, how it becomes part of a wealthy family's daily life. You see the grand public spaces, the forums, the baths, the temples filled with sculptures, understanding for the first time the sheer scale of the demand for your craft. You begin to recognize the faces of other artisans, the stone suppliers, the metal workers. You are building a mental map not just of streets, but of the entire ecosystem that supports your art. Most importantly, you are learning to read people. You learn which clients are prompt with payment and which ones require gentle, respectful reminders. You observe how the steward of a great house speaks, how he carries himself, and you unconsciously begin to mimic that air of quiet competence. These errands are a crash course in the business of art, teaching you that a successful sculptor must be not only a master of his hands, but also a shrewd judge of character and a reliable man of business. Each time you return to the workshop, the pouch of coins safely delivered or the materials accounted for, you have brought back more than just an object. You have brought back a piece of the wider world, and with it, a slowly dawning understanding of the man you might one day become. This obsession with perfect form and anatomy is only one half of the artistic equation. You could carve the most beautifully muscled figure in the world, but if it collapses under its own weight the moment you step away, your masterpiece becomes little more than an expensive pile of rubble. This is where the sculptor's art converges with the engineer's mind. Beyond aesthetics, you are forced to learn the silent, hidden language of physics, the principles of balance, stress, and mass that keep your work standing for centuries. Your first brutal lesson in this reality comes not from a lecture, but from a disaster. Perhaps you are helping to move a nearly finished statue of a goddess, your hands gripping the base as you and several others shuffle carefully across the workshop floor. Someone's foot slips on a stray marble chip. For a heart-stopping second, the statue tilts. It doesn't fall, but the sudden, terrifying shift in weight, the groan of strained stone, and the collective gasp from everyone present leaves you shaking. The master doesn't shout. He simply points to the base of the statue, his finger tracing an almost invisible hairline crack that has just appeared. That crack is a silent scream about failed physics. It tells you that the distribution of weight was precarious, that the stress points were not properly calculated, and that the entire piece was a whisper away from total ruin. In that moment, you understand that true mastery is invisible. It's not just what you see on the surface, it's the profound, structural intelligence holding it all together. This begins your education in the most critical calculation of all, the center of gravity. For any freestanding figure, especially one in a dynamic pose like a contrapposto stance where the weight rests on one straight leg, finding this balance point is everything. You are taught to use plumb lines, simple weighted strings, to map the figure's alignment from every angle. From the front, the line must drop straight down from the hollow at the base of the neck, through the supporting knee, and directly into the center of the foot. From the side, another line must confirm the lean of the torso is perfectly countered by the thrust of the hip. If these lines fall outside the footprint of the base, the statue is inherently unstable, a catastrophe waiting for a stiff breeze or a minor tremor. You learn to build this stability right into the armature of your wax models and the initial roughing out of your stone, making the base wider and heavier than seems aesthetically necessary. That block of marble between a figure's feet isn't just uncarved stone, it is a calculated counterweight, an anchor of pure necessity disguised by the artistry that surrounds it. And then there is the enemy within the stone itself, hidden flaws. A beautiful, creamy block of Carrara marble can conceal a treacherous secret, a soft vein, a crystalline imperfection, or a hairline fissure invisible to the eye. Striking this flaw with a chisel doesn't produce a clean fracture. It can cause the entire block to split in a way you never intended, shearing off an arm or shattering a torso. You learn to listen to the stone long before you ever swing a mallet. You tap it gently with a small hammer in different places, your ear tuned to the subtle music of the material. A clear, high-pitched ping indicates solid, reliable stone. A dull, muddy thud is a warning of a hidden void or a weak spot. This acoustic testing becomes a sacred ritual, a way of diagnosing the health of your material before you commit to the irrevocable act of carving. Sometimes the only solution is to change your design, to carve the figure's bent arm in a way that avoids the flawed section entirely, turning a potential weakness into a feature of the composition. The greatest test of this structural understanding comes with the most ambitious projects, figures in action, a carving of Diana the huntress drawing her bow, or a dying warrior collapsing onto his shield, presents a breathtaking illusion of movement that is, in reality, a meticulously engineered static form. To make an outstretched arm hold a bronze arrow without snapping, the stone within the arm must be left thicker, its internal grain running in a way that maximizes tensile strength. The hanging arm of a fallen soldier must be seamlessly joined to the torso at the shoulder, often reinforced with a strategically placed strut, like a fold of cloak or a shield, that appears to be a natural part of the scene but is actually a cleverly disguised architectural support. The Roman love for realism constantly pushed against the physical limits of the material, and your job as an apprentice was to learn how to negotiate that tension. You weren't just copying the Greek masters, you were solving the complex structural puzzles they invented, ensuring that the drama and dynamism of their art would defy gravity itself, standing not just as a tribute to beauty, but as a monumental victory of intelligence over inertia. The rhythmic tap of your chisel might feel like a conversation with the stone, but the true heartbeat of the workshop is the sound of coins clinking on the master's heavy wooden desk. Your education in art is inseparable from your immersion in commerce, and your first lessons in this complex dance come not from formal instruction, but from the conversations you are meant to overhear while silently sharpening tools in the corner or refilling a wine cup. The workshop is a business, and you are learning that a masterpiece has no value until it is paid for. You quickly learn to recognize the different types of clients by their dress, their bearing, and the way the master greets them. A wealthy knight might arrive to commission a bust of his ancestor for the family shrine. His negotiations are direct, focused on the quality of the marble and the speed of delivery. The master might take him to the yard to select a specific block, pointing out its fine grain and lack of flaws, a subtle way of justifying a higher price. You hear the master break down the cost, not as a single sum but as a detailed list: the price of the raw stone, the cost of its transport from the quarry at Luna, the weeks of skilled labor required for the carving, and a final premium for his own design and oversight. This is your first glimpse into the real economics of your craft. The art is only one line item in a much larger financial calculation. Then there are the patrons of a different caliber entirely. A senator or a wealthy freedman, flush with new money from a lucrative trade deal, arrives not for a single bust, but to outfit his entire new villa on the Palatine Hill. He wants a suite of statues for his garden, copies of famous Greek bronzes for his atrium, and intricate reliefs for his dining room. This negotiation is a days-long affair, a delicate minuet of flattery, display, and hard-nosed bargaining. The master brings out his portfolio, wax models and drawings of previous work, and the two men discuss themes and subjects as much as price. Does the patron want a theme of Bacchus to suggest a life of luxury and pleasure, or perhaps a series of stern Republican heroes to project an image of gravitas and tradition? The client's choice is a public statement, and the master's ability to interpret and execute that statement is what secures the commission. The most nerve-wracking visits, however, are from the representatives of the imperial household. These men do not bargain, they command. They arrive with a specific, often grandiose demand: a new statue for the Forum of Augustus, a series of portraits of the emperor for distribution to every major city in the empire, a monumental relief to celebrate a recent military victory. The pressure on the master is immense, the fee is substantial, but the timeline is unforgiving and the consequences for failure are unthinkable. There is no room for error in the marble, no room for delay in the schedule. An imperial commission can make a master's reputation for life, but it can also break his workshop if he cannot deliver perfection on an impossible scale. You watch the master's face, usually a mask of calm authority, tighten with a mix of ambition and anxiety as he agrees to the terms. The entire workshop's energy shifts after such a visit. The stakes are no longer about profit, but about survival and prestige in the highest circles of power. Through all of this, you are the silent witness, the fly on the marble wall. You learn that the patron is not just a source of money, but a creative partner, and often a difficult one. You hear wealthy men with no artistic training demand impossible changes, asking for a head to be made larger to convey more dignity, or for a pose to be altered because it looked unlucky in a dream. You see the master's diplomacy in action, gently steering them toward a solution that is both aesthetically sound and physically possible, all while making them feel their every whim is being honored. He might say a larger head would certainly convey the gravitas you desire, dominus, but to maintain the divine proportions of the figure, we would need to adjust the shoulders as well, which would require an additional 2 weeks of work and, regrettably, a supplementary fee for the extra marble. The client, faced with the reality of cost and time, often acquiesces to the master's original, superior design. This is where you learn that being a great artist means also being a great psychologist and a savvy businessman. Your role in this commercial engine is small but vital. You are entrusted with the raw numbers. The master might have you tally the weekly consumption of bronze ingots or measure the amount of marble wasted in chips and dust, calculating the loss against the original block's purchase price. You run errands to the wharf to confirm the arrival of a shipment and its weight, ensuring the quarrymen haven't cheated him. You see the ledgers, the careful records of expenses for tools, pigments, apprentices' food, and the wages for the skilled opefices. This granular view of the workshop's finances teaches you the most brutal lesson of all. Passion alone cannot pay the bills. The sublime beauty of a perfectly carved drapery is, in the ledger, simply the product of 22 days of a highly paid sculptor's labor, plus the cost of 3 specific chisels that were worn down in the process. This constant tension between the ideal of art and the reality of commerce becomes the unspoken backdrop to every stroke of your hammer, a daily reminder that your future will depend as much on your skill with numbers as your skill with a chisel. The relentless training in anatomy and the rigorous practice of copying Greek masterwork serve a purpose far greater than just honing your skill. They are the foundation upon which you will eventually build your own artistic identity, a path that begins to reveal itself as you master the fundamentals. The workshop, for all its structured hierarchy, is not a factory producing identical craftsmen. Within its dusty confines, your natural inclinations, your quiet observations, and even the subtle biases of your own hands will slowly pull you toward one of 3 distinct and prestigious specializations: the divine, the imperial, or the mortal. For those with a patient hand and a soul drawn to the eternal, the path of the gods beckons. This specialization demands more than technical skill. It requires a deep, almost spiritual understanding of the ideal. You would find yourself apprenticed to the sculptors who work exclusively for temples and major public sanctuaries, tasked with creating the cult statues that millions will worship. Here, the Greek canon is not a guideline, it is law. Your work is to make the intangible tangible, to give stone the feeling of divine perfection and serene power. A statue of Jupiter must radiate absolute, unchallengeable authority, his brow commanding and his posture immovably majestic. A Venus must capture an ethereal, otherworldly beauty that is both inviting and untouchably perfect. Every muscle, every fold of drapery is carved to conform to an idealized standard that transcends any single human model. The pressure is immense. A flaw in the proportion of a god's face isn't just an artistic failure, it could be seen as a religious offense. This path is for the contemplative artist, the one who finds satisfaction in achieving a timeless, perfect form, whose name might be forgotten by history, but whose work will define a civilization's image of the divine for millennia. A very different energy hums around the sculptors who specialize in the most powerful mortals of all, the emperors and their family. Imperial portraiture is less about ideal perfection and more about the masterful fusion of man and myth. This is the most politically charged and therefore the most dangerous specialization you could enter. Your client is not just a wealthy patron, it is the state itself, and the face you are carving will be replicated and sent to every corner of the empire to project the emperor's power, virtue, and divine right to rule. The technical challenge is unique. You must work from a proved model, often a bust created by the emperor's own favorite sculptor in Rome, and your job is to replicate it with absolute fidelity across hundreds of copies. But it goes beyond mere copying. You must learn to capture the specific propaganda of the moment. Is the new emperor a young military hero? Then you emphasize a strong, determined jaw, a resolute gaze, and perhaps an intricate cuirass. Is he a wise, philosophical ruler bringing a new era of peace? Then you soften the features, give him a thoughtful, distant look, and model his hair in the style of a Greek intellectual. You become an expert in reading the subtle political messages etched into a hairstyle or the set of a mouth. One mistake carrying over the features of a deposed or disgraced predecessor could have severe consequences. This path is for the shrewd, ambitious artist who understands that his chisel is a political tool and whose success is tied directly to the rise and fall of men in purple. And then there is the path of the mortal, the art of memory and personal legacy. This specialization thrives in the funerary workshops that line the roads leading out of the city, where apprentices learn to carve not for the glory of gods or emperors, but for the love of families. Here you craft the stelae and sarcophagus reliefs that will adorn the tombs of wealthy merchants, successful freedmen, and beloved matrons. The subject matter is intimate and deeply human. A relief might show a baker surrounded by the tools of his trade, a proud reminder of the skill that earned his fortune. Another might depict a whole family, their faces individualized and warm, shaking hands in a symbolic gesture of eternal farewell. This art is less concerned with ideal proportions and more with capturing personality, trade, and tender emotion. You learn to tell a whole life story in a single panel of stone. The technical focus shifts to intricate detail, the texture of bread loaves in a basket, the weave of a child's tunic, the gentle smile of a wife. The pace is often faster, driven by the immediate needs of grieving families, but the emotional reward is profound. You are not creating a distant object of worship or power. You are giving a family a permanent, tangible memory of someone they loved. This path is for the empathetic artist, the storyteller who finds beauty in the everyday and whose work offers comfort and a promise of remembrance long after the funeral pyre has cooled. Your choice, whether guided by temperament, opportunity, or the master's assessment of your strengths, will set the course of your entire career, determining not just what you sculpt, but whose eyes will look upon your work for generations to come. But the dazzling white marble that defines our modern image of classical sculpture is a complete fiction, a bare and bleached skeleton of what these works truly were. The silent monochrome gods and heroes in our museums will be utterly unrecognizable and perhaps even shockingly garish to a Roman viewer. The dirty, vibrant secret of the ancient workshop is that every statue, every frieze, every ornate sarcophagus was a riot of color, a technicolor dream brought to life through the alchemy of paint. This practice, known as polychromy, was not an optional extra. It was the final, essential act that separated a finely carved block of stone from a living, breathing representation of a god or a man. And as the lowliest member of the workshop, the most painstaking and meticulous labor of bringing this color to life fell to you. Your introduction to this hidden world begins not with a brush, but with a mortar and pestle. The master or a senior color specialist hands you a lump of raw material, a piece of deep red rock from Sinope, a chunk of sparkling blue azurite, a precious chip of golden yellow orpiment, and a heavy stone grinder. Your task is to reduce these beautiful minerals to the finest, most silken powder imaginable. This is a test of pure endurance. You sit for hours, circling the pestle in the mortar with a steady, rhythmic motion, your arms screaming in protest. The goal is a powder so fine that it feels like air between your fingers, with not a single gritty crystal remaining. Any granule left undissolved will create a rough, ugly texture on the sacred surface of the statue, ruining the illusion of skin or fabric. This monotonous grinding is another lesson in humility and patience, teaching you that the most brilliant colors are born from the most tedious labor. Once the pigments are prepared, the real magic begins. Mixing the binders, pure pigment powder would simply dust off the stone. To make it stick and last for generations, it must be suspended in a medium. You are taught to prepare a variety of these sacred recipes. For some colors, you mix the powder with heated beeswax, creating an encaustic paste that can be buffed to a soft, luminous sheen. For others, you use a tempera base, painstakingly emulsifying the pigment with egg yolk, a process that requires a precise hand to get the consistency just right. The most expensive and prized medium is also the simplest, powdered pigment mixed with pure water to create a wash, used only on the finest grained marbles where the color could sink deep into the stone's pores for a stunningly natural, matte finish. Each mixture has its own smell, its own texture, and its own specific use, a complex paint box that you must learn by heart. Then, under the exacting eye of the master, you finally pick up a brush, but not for the important parts. Your first foray into painting is on the hidden areas, the parts that will not be scrutinized. You practice on the back of a statue or on the underside of a base, applying the broad, flat fields of color for backgrounds or clothing. The master watches your every stroke, ensuring you lay the color down evenly, without streaks or drips. You learn the different qualities of the brushes, fine-pointed ones made from a few precious squirrel hairs for the most delicate work, and broader, flat brushes made of stiff hog bristle for covering large areas. Only after you have proven your steady hand and patient disposition are you allowed to graduate to the more intricate tasks. You might be trusted to apply the gilding, carefully laying down a sticky mordant and then applying wafer-thin sheets of gold leaf with a soft brush, breathing lightly to avoid blowing away a fortune with a single exhalation. The ultimate goal, the highest art of polychromy, was verisimilitude, the creation of a figure so lifelike it might step off its pedestal. This meant understanding the subtle language of color. Flesh was not a single tone. You learned to mix a base color for the skin, then use thinner, translucent washes to add the blush of blood in the cheeks, the bluish veins at the wrist, the darker tones of shadow in the musculature. For hair, you build up layers of color from a dark base to lighter highlights, each strand individually suggested. Eyes were masterpieces in miniature, a white ground, a carefully painted iris in shades of brown, green, or blue, and a single dot of black glass paste for the pupil, which when varnished would catch the light and truly seem to see. The result was not a cartoonish mannequin, but a breathtakingly realistic figure, a painted marble general with his crimson cloak, polished bronze armor, and lifelike skin was not a piece of art. He was the embodiment of authority and power. The paint did not cover the sculpture, it completed it, releasing the spirit that the sculptor had so carefully imprisoned within the stone. And though you were only applying the colors under strict instruction, you were part of that final, glorious act of creation, the one that turned craft into pure, undeniable magic. Yet amid the constant percussion of mallets and the grating of rasps, another sound hummed just beneath the surface of the workshop, the low, incessant murmur of gossip. This was not idle chatter, it was the lifeblood of information, a vital stream of news that flowed from the city's heart directly into our dusty courtyard. As an apprentice, your ears became your most valuable tool, far sharper than any chisel. While your hands were busy grinding pigments or oiling tools, you learned to listen, to piece together fragments of conversation between the master and his clients, between the senior sculptors as they took their breaks. This was your unofficial and often terrifying education in the real world beyond art, a world where a whispered scandal could shutter a workshop and a shift in imperial favor could dictate what you carved for years to come. The most common source of news was the master's own clients. A wealthy equestrian, waiting for the unveiling of his wife's portrait, might casually mention to the master that a certain senator had been caught in a financial scandal, his assets seized by the emperor's agents. The master would nod gravely, but the moment the client left, he would turn to his lead sculptor. "Did you hear that? Lucius Aelius's commission, cancel it. Stop work immediately and pull his bust from the display shelf before anyone associates us with his disgrace." In an instant, a half-finished statue became worthless stone, and you learned a brutal lesson in political contagion. Association with the disgrace could stain a workshop's reputation, making it untouchable to other wealthy patrons. You began to understand that the subjects you sculpted were not just art, they were public declarations of alliance, and choosing the wrong patron was a professional death sentence. But the most electrifying and dangerous gossip swirled around the imperial house itself. A high-ranking slave from the Palatine, escorting a court official who had come to check on the progress of an imperial bust, might linger for a moment by the water jars. He'd exchange a quiet word with the master's foreman, a man he knew from a previous commission. In those hushed tones, you might overhear a fragment of a world-shaking drama, that the empress had been exiled to a barren island for alleged adultery, or that the emperor's favorite had suddenly fallen from grace and been forced to take his own life. The news would ripple through the workshop faster than a crack in marble. The implications were immediate and practical. Every portrait of the newly disgraced individual, every statue commissioned to celebrate their lineage, was now toxic. You might be ordered to take a hammer to a nearly finished marble head, reducing the features of a once powerful man to anonymous rubble to be used as filler in a wall. Or more surreptitiously, the workshop might be hired to perform a damnatio memoriae, the official condemnation of memory, carefully recarving the face of a figure on a public monument to resemble someone still in favor. This gossip was also your early warning system for shifts in artistic fashion, which were always dictated by the whims of the palace. A sculptor who had just returned from a commission in Rome might report that the new young emperor preferred a classic, severe style reminiscent of the old republic, a clear political statement distancing himself from the decadent Greek styles of his predecessor. This single piece of information would change everything in the workshop. The master would immediately order the junior sculptors to stop practicing on the voluptuous Praxitean models and instead spend days drawing from older, sterner busts. The demand for copies of smiling Aphrodites would dry up, replaced by commissions for stern-faced, tight-lipped figures of Cato and Brutus. Your entire future skill set had to be agile, ready to pivot overnight based on the aesthetic preferences of one man living atop the Palatine Hill. Your hands were not just your own, they were tools of the political climate, and your ability to adapt would determine if you starved or thrived. In this way, the workshop was a microcosm of the empire itself, a place where art, power, and survival were inextricably linked, and where the most important lessons were never written down, only whispered. The dust you breathe every day is more than just an annoyance. It is a slow, insidious poison. The fine white powder from marble and limestone doesn't just coat your throat, it settles deep in your lungs, a gritty presence you can never quite cough up. Over months and years, this constant irritation leads to a dry, hacking cough that becomes the background music of your life, a condition the Romans called morbus pulmonum, the dust disease. Your chest feels tight, your breath comes shorter after hauling a heavy bucket, and you watch the older sculptors, men not yet 40, who have to stop and lean against a block, wheezing after the slightest exertion. But the dust is only one enemy in the air. If you work near the bronze forge, another hazard waits. When the molten metal is poured, it releases acrid, yellowish fumes that catch in the back of your throat and make your head spin and your stomach churn. The senior craftsmen call these fumes the metal ghosts, and they warn that breathing them too long can drive a man mad with trembling fits and convulsions. There are no masks, no protective gear. You simply wrap a damp cloth around your face and hope it's enough, knowing full well that the price for creating beauty might be your ability to simply draw a clean, painless breath. Your hands, the very instruments of your craft, are a permanent record of every mistake and mishap. They become a map of nicks, scars, and calluses. The most common injury is the glancing blow, a moment of lost focus where the mallet strikes not the chisel's head, but the fingers holding it. The pain is blinding and immediate, a thunderous ache that turns your fingernail black and blue beneath a bloody gash. You learn to bind it tightly with a strip of linen and try to ignore the throbbing as you return to work, your grip now clumsy and painful. Far worse is the deep puncture from a slipping graver or a stray metal shard. These wounds are notorious for festering in the dusty, dirty environment of the workshop. Within a day, the skin around the cut becomes red, hot, and swollen, and a fever can set in, making your head swim and your body ache. This is when you truly fear for your future, because an infected hand could mean the loss of a finger or even the use of the entire limb, ending your career before it ever truly begins. The treatments available are as brutal as the injuries themselves. For a deep cut, an older apprentice might press a wad of spiderwebs into the wound, a folk remedy believed to staunch the bleeding. For the inevitable inflammation and infection, the workshop foreman, who serves as a makeshift medic, might prepare a poultice of crushed garlic and honey, binding it to your hand with a dirty rag. If the wound is particularly bad, the last resort is cauterization. You are held down by two other apprentices while the foreman heats an iron rod in the forge until its tip glows a terrifying cherry red. The smell of your own burning flesh is something you never ever forget. For the dust cough, the prescribed remedy is often a foul-tasting tea made from boiled licorice root or a syrup of honey and vinegar, treatments that might soothe the throat but do nothing to clear the settled powder from your lungs. You learn to endure pain as a constant companion, understanding that complaining only marks you as weak. The work does not stop for injury. You are expected to adapt, to learn to hold a chisel with a bandaged hand, to find a way to contribute even when every movement is fire. This physical toll is the unspoken contract of the apprenticeship, a promise that your body will be worn down, piece by piece, in exchange for the skill to shape eternity. Yet within this rigid and often harsh hierarchy, a different, more personal form of education often flourished in the shadows. While the master's attention was a distant and demanding son, the journeymen, the skilled apophis, were the planets in your immediate orbit, and their influence could make or break your spirit. These men were the true masters of the daily grind, the experts who knew every trick of the trade that wasn't written in any formal canon. They had recently walked the path you were on, and their memories of the struggle were still fresh. A thoughtful word, a small act of kindness, or a moment of stolen instruction from one of these seasoned sculptors could feel like a lifeline in a sea of overwhelming expectation. The smart apprentice quickly learned to identify which journeymen were potential allies. Some were bitter and competitive, guarding their hard-won knowledge like a dragon hoarding gold, viewing every new apprentice as a threat to their own status. But others possessed a different temperament. You might notice a particular sculptor, a man named Gaius perhaps, who worked with a quiet, methodical patience. He never wasted a movement, his chisel strokes were always precise and economical, and he occasionally hummed a tune while he worked, a sign of a man at peace with his craft. This was the kind of man you watched, not just for his skill, but for his character. The relationship would often begin with a small, silent act of service on your part. You would make sure his water jar was always the fullest. You would specially sharpen his favorite set of chisels, putting an extra fine edge on the one he used for detailing eyelashes. You would be the first to sweep the dust from around his workstation at the end of the day. If he noticed your attentiveness, he might one day break the unspoken rule. As you refilled his jar, he might not just grunt an acknowledgement. He might say, "That batch of plaster you mixed yesterday was too thick, it sets too fast. Use a half measure more water next time." This wasn't a reprimand, it was a gift. It was an acknowledgement of your presence and a tiny transfer of invaluable knowledge. This could be the start of an unspoken pact. In exchange for your loyalty and your diligent service, he might become your unofficial patron within the workshop. His guidance took many forms. He might show you how to brace your wrist against the stone to prevent a chisel from slipping and ruining a line. He could explain how to test a batch of clay for the right consistency by its smell and feel, not just its look. He might even let you try a few practice strokes on a piece of scrap marble under his watchful eye, an opportunity you would never get from the master at this early stage. This mentorship also offered a crucial layer of protection. If a rival apprentice tried to sabotage your work or blame you for a mistake, a respected journeyman could step in with a word of authority. I saw him sharpening tools all morning. He wasn't near the forge. He might say, his simple statement carrying far more weight than your frantic denials. He could shield you from the worst of the master's wrath, perhaps taking a small portion of the blame for a collective error to lessen the punishment that would fall on you. In return, your loyalty to him was absolute. You were his extra set of hands, his eyes and ears on the other side of the workshop. You would help him with his own side projects, perhaps a small personal carving he was making to sell at the festival, or you would cover for him if he needed to slip away for an hour. This system of informal patronage was the hidden grease that kept the workshop's social machinery running. It was a recognition that while the master taught the art, the journeyman taught the craft, the survival skills, the shortcuts, and the quiet humanity that could make the long, grueling road from apprentice to artist not just bearable, but possible. In this world of strict hierarchy and unspoken rules, the truly ambitious apprentice quickly learns that raw talent is not enough. To rise from the endless drudgery of sweeping and hauling, you must master a subtle art of your own, the art of being noticed for the right reasons. The master's attention is a finite resource, a spotlight that rarely swings down to the lowest level, and capturing it requires a blend of cunning, dedication, and strategic brilliance that goes far beyond simply doing what you're told. The smartest novices understand that every task, no matter how menial, is an audition. Your first and most powerful strategy is the silent language of anticipation. Anyone can refill a water jar when it's empty, but you learn to watch the senior sculptors, to understand their rhythms and their needs before they do. You notice that the sculptor working on fine drapery with a rasp needs to cool his tool more frequently than the man roughing out a block with a heavy point chisel. So you ensure his jar is always full before he even has to glance toward it. You see the master preparing to mix a fresh batch of plaster for a mold, and you have the clean water and sifted powder waiting at his elbow before he can call for it. This isn't just helpful, it's a nonverbal demonstration of your observation skills and your understanding of the workflow, proving you possess a sculptor's mind even while performing a laborer's duties. Then there is the philosophy of the extra mile, a dangerous but potentially rewarding path. Your assigned task is to sweep the workshop floor. The basic requirement is to clear the major piles of chips and dust. But you, the ambitious one, you go further. You take a damp rag and meticulously wipe down the bases of the finished statues, removing the fine, settled powder that others ignore. You organize the tool wall not just by type, but by size, polishing the wooden handles until they gleam. This is a calculated risk. A jealous rival might accuse you of wasting time on unnecessary vanity, or the master might see it as a comment on the workshop's usual standards. But if done with quiet humility, it signals a profound pride in the craft itself and a personal standard of excellence that applies to everything you touch, no matter how small. It whispers that you see yourself not as a menial worker, but as a guardian of the workshop's dignity. The most daring strategy, however, involves demonstrating innovation. You are tasked with wedging a large batch of clay, a repetitive and mind-numbing chore, but you've been watching, and you notice that the senior modelers sometimes complain that the clay still has tiny air pockets, which can cause explosions in the kiln during the lost wax process. You can't change the wedging table or the process, but you can change your technique. You develop a method of slamming the clay down at a slight angle and folding it more meticulously, spending extra minutes on each lump to ensure it is perfectly homogeneous. You don't announce your discovery, you simply do it, and one day the lead bronze smith might remark to the master, "This latest batch of clay is exceptional, no bubbles at all." The master might not know it was you, but the foreman does, and that quiet note of quality attached to your work becomes a mark in your favor. Ultimately, the goal of all this subtle effort is to create a single precious moment, the moment you are given a chance. It might not be a dramatic promotion. It might be the master, after watching you sharpen tools with unwavering care for months, finally gesturing you over to a block of stone and saying, "The acanthus leaf on this frieze is repetitive work. The design is simple. See if you can manage the pattern without breaking the line." Your heart hammers in your chest. This is not a practice scrap. This is a real commission. Every ounce of your being focuses on that chisel, on transferring the hours of observation into a single, flawless execution. You are no longer just an apprentice hoping for favor. You are an artist being tested, and the quality of your silence, the steady confidence of your hand, is your final and most powerful argument for why you deserve to climb from the dusty floor and claim your place at the workbench. Then the day arrives that changes everything. A messenger in the livery of a powerful state official strides into the workshop, silencing the usual din with his presence. He doesn't shout, he simply hands a sealed scroll to the master. The room holds its breath as the magister breaks the wax seal, his eyes scanning the contents. A slow smile, rare and profound, spreads across his dust-flecked face. He looks up and the entire workshop seems to lean in. "We have it," he announces, his voice thick with a mix of triumph and trepidation. "The frieze for the new temple of Mars altar, the full procession, they've awarded us the commission." For a heartbeat, there is utter silence. Then the workshop erupts in a roar of approval, a cathartic release of pride and shared ambition. You, the lowliest apprentice, feel the energy shift in the very air you breathe. The familiar, rhythmic chaos of daily work is about to transform into a military campaign, and every single one of you has just been drafted. The scroll is not just a congratulations, it is a battle plan. The master unrolls the detailed specifications on his large planning table, weighing down the corners with polishing stones. The senior sculptors crowd around, their voices a low, intense murmur. The scale is staggering, dozens of life-size figures, horses and chariots in a continuous narrative stretching over 30 feet of marble. The timeline is brutally short, dictated by the temple's dedication date, a deadline set by the emperor himself and utterly non-negotiable, and the budget, while generous, is a meticulously itemized contract that leaves no room for error or wasted material. The pressure is immediate and immense. This is no longer about producing art. It is about executing a piece of state propaganda, a permanent testament to Roman power that will be viewed by millions for centuries to come. The prestige of such a project can elevate the master to the highest echelons of society, but the cost of failure is ruin, financial, professional, and perhaps even personal, if it displeases the wrong people in power. Overnight, the workshop reorganizes itself into a frenetic, highly specialized factory. The usual gentle hierarchy hardens into a rigid chain of command. The master becomes the general, dividing the vast project into manageable sections. Each senior sculptor, each apifex is given responsibility for a specific part of the frieze. One takes all the horses, another the armored soldiers, a third the captured barbarian prisoners. Their apprentices become their dedicated squads, and you are assigned to one of them. Your days of generalized labor are over. You are now a specialist in the production of helmet plumes, or perhaps horse harnesses, or the folds of a specific type of cloak. The master creates a master cartoon, a full-size drawing on parchment that is pinned to the wall, showing the entire composition. This is the sacred text, the map you must all follow without deviation. Your role intensifies beyond recognition. The endless water hauling is now handled by a team of brand new, wide-eyed apprentices, the very bottom of the new hierarchy you've just escaped. Your world becomes a blur of focused, high-stakes repetition. You are no longer roughing out practice cubes. You are entrusted with the initial blocking of your assigned section on a precious, expensive block of marble, using the master's precise measurements. The fear of making a mistake is paralyzing, but the relentless pace of work leaves no time for hesitation. You work from dawn until deep into the night, your muscles aching from the constant vibration of the mallet, your eyes straining in the flickering light of oil lamps that now extend the working day. The workshop never truly sleeps. The sound of carving becomes the soundtrack of your dreams. The demand for materials becomes insatiable. You are sent to the wharves daily, Chinese letter, the arrival of the marble blocks, nervously checking their quality upon delivery. The pigment grinders work in shifts to produce enough paint for the eventual polychromy. The forge glows day and night as the metalworkers produce the specialized chisels and clamps needed for the project. The workshop floor is a labyrinth of partially carved figures, like a field of stone giants slowly waking up. The master moves constantly between stations, his calipers and charcoal stick in hand, making minute corrections, his face a mask of intense concentration. He is no longer just a teacher, he is a conductor orchestrating a symphony of stone, and every tap of every mallet must be in perfect time. This immense pressure forges a new kind of camaraderie among the apprentices. The petty rivalries and sabotages of the early days melt away in the face of the shared Herculean task. You are all in this together. You cover for each other when exhaustion threatens to cause a mistake. You share tricks you've discovered for achieving a certain texture more quickly. You help move each other's heavy stones. The success of the entire frieze depends on the seamless integration of every section, and that requires a level of cooperation you've never known before. You eat your simple meals together in a weary, silent huddle, too tired for talk, but bound by a mutual respect earned through shared exhaustion and purpose. Months blur into one another. The change is gradual but incredible to witness. The chaotic pile of raw marble slowly transforms. A horse head emerges from one block, its stone nostrils flaring. An armored leg, muscled and powerful, steps out from another. The master's drawn lines become three-dimensional reality, a procession frozen in mid-step, waiting for the command to continue its marble march. The final weeks are a crescendo of activity, the final polishing, the meticulous painting, the nerve-wracking process of disassembling the sections for transport to the temple site. When the last ox cart laden with your finished work rumbles out of the workshop gates, a profound silence descends. It's a silence heavy with fatigue, but also swelling with an indescribable pride. You look at your hands, calloused and scarred, and then at the empty spaces where the giants once stood. You didn't just carve stone, you helped build a piece of Rome itself. And you know with a certainty that settles deep in your bones that long after you are dust, your invisible contribution will still be standing, a silent testament to the thousands of unseen hands that lifted the empire's glory. After years of sweat, dust, and mastering the silent language of stone, the moment you've worked toward finally arrives. It isn't marked by a grand ceremony or a public announcement, but by a quiet, profoundly significant act from the master. He walks over to your workbench, not to correct or critique, but to observe. After a long moment of studying your hands as they guide a chisel with a confidence that was once foreign to them, he simply says, "It is time for you to make your masterpiece." This is not a test he gives you. It is the test, the singular project that will define your entire apprenticeship and determine the future course of your life. The term masterpiece is literal. You are to conceive, design, and execute a complete work of sculpture entirely on your own, from the first sketch on a wax tablet to the final application of polish or paint. This is your chance to demonstrate that you have absorbed every lesson, not just the manual skills of carving and casting, but the intellectual disciplines of design, proportion, and narrative. The subject is often of your own choosing, a deliberate move by the master to see where your artistic passions truly lie. Do you choose to sculpt a mythological scene, proving your fluency in the Greek canon and your ability to tell a story in stone, or do you opt for a penetratingly realistic portrait bust, showcasing your understanding of anatomy and your skill in capturing the human spirit? Your choice is the first declaration of the artist you intend to become. The process is grueling and solitary. For weeks, you live with your chosen block of marble or lump of wax, the master and the journeyman offering no advice unless your technique threatens the structural integrity of the piece. This is your solitary vision, your unaided skill. Every measurement with the calipers, every decisive strike of the mallet, every delicate stroke of the rasp is a testament to the years of training burned into your muscle memory. When you finally apply the last bit of gilding to a laurel wreath or buff the stone to a soft sheen, you step back not just from a statue, but from a mirror. This piece is a physical manifestation of everything you have learned, every hardship you have endured, and every spark of talent that first brought you to the workshop door. The Judgment Day is a private, solemn affair. Your piece is placed in the center of the workshop. The master and often a council of senior operatives from your own and sometimes other workshops circle it in silence. They are not looking for flashy technique or grandiose scale. They are assessing the fundamentals, the precision of the proportions, the stability of the form, the subtlety of the finish, the clarity of the artistic intention. They run their hands over the surface, feeling for flaws the eye cannot see. They use their dividers to check the accuracy of your measurements against the established canons. This is a forensic examination of your competence. A single correctable error might earn you a stern critique and a command to try again in 6 months. A fundamental flaw in proportion or a hidden crack from poor stone selection means failure, potentially extending your indenture for another year or more. But if the work is sound, if it demonstrates a complete and masterful command of the craft, the master will finally turn to you and give a slow, deliberate nod. That nod is worth more than any contract. With this artistic approval secured, the final step is a legal and social one. If you were an indentured apprentice, your father and the master would have witnesses summoned to formally dissolve the tacito, the contract that bound you. The document might be ceremonially burned or voided with a knife slash across the wax. If you were a slave apprentice, the master would have the funds from your labor or from a specially wealthy patron you'd impressed, ready to formally purchase your freedom, a transaction recorded by a magistrate. In either case, you are no longer a discipulus, you are now an apifex, a journeyman, a term derived from the French journée meaning day, for you are now a skilled laborer who earns a daily wage for your work. The celebration that follows is a raucous, heartfelt affair paid for by the master himself. The workshop closes early, jugs of wine are brought out and a fine meal is shared. For one evening, the rigid hierarchy dissolves. The journeymen who were once your aloof superiors clap you on the back as an equal. The master might even present you with a final gift, a set of your own high-quality chisels, their wooden handles freshly oiled and their steel heads gleaming. This gift is powerfully symbolic. It represents the tools of your trade, now truly your own. But more than that, it signifies that you are no longer a consumer of knowledge, but a producer of art, equipped to build your own legacy. As the festivities wind down, you look around the dusty, familiar workshop. It is still your home, but it is no longer your prison. The door is open, and the vast, demanding, opportunity-rich world of Rome awaits your skilled hands. And so we arrive at the final, silent lesson. For years, your world was a symphony of sound. The percussive tap of the mallet, the grating hiss of the rasp, the low roar of the forge. But now, as you stand on the threshold of your own future, you realize the most enduring sound is the one that lives inside you. It is the quiet, the deep and abiding stillness of a confidence forged not in easy victories, but in the relentless, patient overcoming of failure. The journey from the wide-eyed novice clutching a water bucket to the steady-handed journeyman receiving your own set of tools was never just about learning to shape stone. It was about allowing the stone to shape you. Look at your hands. They are no longer the soft hands of a boy. They are a map of your education, calloused, nicked and permanently stained with a fine white dust that no amount of scrubbing will ever fully remove. But that dust is more than a stain. It has become a part of you, as integral as the marrow in your bones. Each tiny granule is a memory. This one is from the first time you successfully rough-hewed a cube without it splitting. That one is from the heart-stopping moment you almost chipped the nose off a patron's bust. And this one right here is from the final polish on your masterpiece, a moment of pride so profound it felt like a physical warmth in your chest. The rigorous training did more than teach you the canon of proportions or the temper of steel. It carved away your impatience, your arrogance, your fear. It left behind a core of resilience, of humility in the face of the material, and of a quiet, unshakable certainty that you can begin with a formless block and through sheer will and learned skill, discover the beauty waiting within. This is the legacy of the anonymous apprentice. When you walk through the forum now or stand in the shadow of a great temple, you do not see faceless monuments. You see the ghost of 1,000 workshops. You see the sweat of the water carrier, the keen eye of the journeyman mixing plaster, the master's charcoal sketch on a vast block of marble. You understand that every flawless curve, every piercing gaze from a stone eye, every fold of frozen drapery was paid for in blisters and aching backs, in the silent anxiety of a beginner terrified of making that one irrevocable mistake. The glory of Rome was not built by geniuses working in isolated splendor. It was built by a chain of hands, passing knowledge down through generations, each apprentice standing on the shoulders of those who came before, each one adding their own infinitesimal improvement to the craft. So the next time you see a Roman statue in a museum, don't just look at the figure it represents. Look closer, see the thousands of tiny chisel marks, the subtle variations that prove it was made by a human hand, not a machine. In those marks, you will find the true story. You will hear the echo of a mallet strike from 2,000 years ago, feel the presence of the young person who held that chisel, and understand that the greatest masterpiece to emerge from the workshop was not the statue itself, but the sculptor, forged in fire and patience, their characters shaped with the same deliberate care as the marble they served. The art has endured, but the true victory was the transformation of the artist.